Good morning, colleagues. My introduction will be brief. I met Dr. Castaneda about in 2014. Actually, it was before that because there was an amazing conference in Tarragona, Spain, which is just outside of Barcelona. Excuse my voice. And for this conference, the designers of the conference had selected 8 teams of 8 researchers who are all over the world. And Dr. Castaneda and myself were on the same team of 8 people, so we were preparing our presentation for the conference through this team for an entire year. And once we got our act together, as the other 8 teams, we presented to each other. And I just remember a moment where we were trying to have a final meeting via Zoom. I was in Korea. Where were you at the time?
I was in London.
She was in London. The time was like 2 o'clock in the morning for her, or?
And Michigan, Punya Mishra was in Michigan.
Yeah.
Yes.
People were all over the world trying to have this final Zoom conference before we went to Spain. And when we got there, it worked wonderfully well. We met a number of amazing scholars. I think we have at least 2 publications that we jointly published out of that. So from 2014 to the present, Dr. Castaneda has had an amazing career. Prolific publications in all of the right places. She's actually also been the guest editor for the International Journal of Education and Technology in Higher Education, as well as one of her journals that's local to her university. So she's continued that tradition of bringing scholars together from all over the world to talk about the very best conceptualizations and research and practices, particularly in the area of how do we think about digital technology in the context of teaching and learning. And so you'll see in her title that she's talking about both holistic and critical visions. And she definitely has a critical vision. So I was reading one of her articles, and it's called More Tools, Making Sense of Ongoing Higher Education. And you can see on every page, I'm outlining just about everything she's saying. And then I began to wonder, what were the pieces that I didn't highlight? What was wrong with those pieces of information? Because half of the page is already highlighted. I was really learning a lot. So what I'd like to say, though, is that you can see these dual conceptions of looking at digital technology intensively, but also looking at it in a more holistic way. Her concept of personal learning environments, meaning that we have to have a more holistic understanding of how people actually engage with technology beyond the notion of these being instruments that are just a part of instructional design. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Jabari. I'll pay for it, for sure. Well, Jabari is a wonderful liar, but also is an amazing colleague. So thank you very much for your introduction. Thank you very much to the Citizen Group for having me here. And thank you all, UC Berkeley, for having me here for 4 months. This is my last week in this university as visiting scholar, but it has been a pleasure. This morning I want to introduce myself and to try to show you what are some of my perspectives related to educational technology. I'm from the University of Murcia. This is Murcia. University of Murcia is a medium-sized public university in Spain. It's about 34,000 students, and we are in Europe, here in the southeast of Spain. It's not a very well-known place, but we are there. If you were lost there, you can come and say hello. Please come. But actually, I'm originally from Colombia, so the triangle is complete. We're finally here. My background is in education. I'm what we called in Europe a pedagogist. Pedagogy in Europe is not only about teaching, it's about education in general, organization, non-formal education, and so on. So I'm a pedagogist, and my PhD and my master thesis is in educational technology, but from the pedagogical point of view, from the bright side of life. No, also from the dark side of life. Never have very clear about it. But anyway, I'm an educationalist. So I'm from this duet of technology and education. Even if I'm very glad to say that I'm in educational technology, I'm very, very worried about education, about people. My question with technology and education, and especially with educational technology, is that until now, the majority of our definitions about what is educational technology and how we work in educational technology starts from the definition of technology as something that is created by humans, and basically we're focused especially in information and communication technology. And when we talk about education, we always talk about instructional design and technology as resources for this instructional design. Indeed, this is very important, and this is but this has been probably the most important or general perception about educational technology during the last 50 years. And in those 50 years, this is important, but from my point of view, this duet with this definition is enlightening some part about education, but a very small part of it. All of the other things that are related with technology and education are completely in dark by the moment, because we are too focused on technologies, on how to use technologies in the classroom. That is an important thing, but it's not the only. Why is not the only? For understanding why I'm saying that it's not the only, I would invite you to deconstruct a bit these two terms. Let's start with technology. When we normally speak about technology, we normally speak about something that is created by humans and is a tool for doing things. Normally, I remember when I started to be interested in educational technology, that one of my professors told me that technology is all those things that are not growing from the soil. Yes, are not made, that all of them by humans for doing things. But if you think a bit about the current technologies, this definition is a bit small for it. Indeed, there are many authors around the world that are reflecting about what exactly is technology and what are other aspects about technology that we have to take into account when we are defining technology. Professor Rodriguez, Professor Oliver from London, Professor Neil Selwyn, Jordi Adel, George Velezianos, Paco Llorens, Frances Llorens, sorry. They all define technology not only as an artifact or not only as an instrument. They're talking about the technology as cause, the technology as a social intervention, the technology as a political and ideological fight place. But it's quite crucial and quite difficult to understand. So in these moments of political and ideological fight places, is a socio-cultural and ideological phenomena. And when we think on these perceptions about technology, we need to remember that technology is not only being used for doing things, it's also configuring everything in social, configuring relationship models, configuring personal models, configuring learning models, and definitely configuring institutional models. And all of them are related to education. But even more, when we talk about what is our relationship with technology, it's not new, all of these things are not new, but definitely we have to think not only in people and things, but how to think in them in the relational situation. Basically, all the stuff about relational ontologies and how the things that we are studying or the things that we are analyzing are not only people with things and who is influencing what or what is influencing whom. The symmetry on this is quite controversial and definitely is not clear. And for me, definitely the table is less important than the people using the table. But how they interact and how they enact the learning activity is not clear. That is difference, or what is the difference between them all. So, and with all of them, they are working on these relationship models. How are they? This is about technology, but the other hand is about education. When we are speaking about education, we are all the time speaking about learning. Indeed, all the topics about educational technology are with learning. probably because also because of the Anglo-Saxon tradition, because in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, the difference between teaching and learning and education and the meaning of education is not exactly the same as in other languages around the world, and other languages in the continental Europe, for example, German, Spanish, French, Italian. We're using these terms for different things. But the case is that we're all the time talking about learning technologies, technology-enhanced learning, learning analytics, virtual learning environments, and so on. But indeed, we are not speaking about, this is what Professor Gerd Biestad called learnification. We are all the time putting the emphasis on the learning. That is something that happened, but happened there. And we're not taking care about teaching or about what happened before. Is more important? Nobody's important. We cannot let them to do something there. We have to think about not only learning as a quality for the other things. The learning, the virtual environment is for learning. The whatever is for learning. But what about learning? Are we reflecting about learning where, learning with, and learning to what? Contents are pretty important. No, the most important one, from my point of view, and I'm not the only, I have learned it from someone else, is that the most important thing, even if the methodology is important, if the how is important, and we are very worried about the how, the what is crucial. What is behind? But also, education is about pedagogy, not just teaching. Not just learning, but not only just teaching. It's about organization. It's about non-formal and formal context. It's about social compromise. It's about educational purpose. What is the educational purpose? What is the purpose of education? It's about epistemic and epistemological beliefs, and it's about perspectives, epistemological perspectives about what is teaching and what is learning. Indeed, what is knowledge? And all of these are very philosophical things that always seems to be far away from what we do, but indeed they are crucial for defining what are we doing. But it's also, education is about people. And I love this definition that I got I don't remember exactly the name of the author, but I love when one big author says, we are trying to create knowing beings in education. What about human beings? Indeed, what about social human beings? Because when we speak about human beings or personalization or self-regulation or whatever, we are talking about people learning by themselves. People individualized. People, human beings alone. But what about the social? What about all the things that define us as humans that are different than knowledge? These are my two big concerns. The question is, when I think on how to go further these two concerns, I try to propose or to work on holistic and critical visions about teaching and learning. So I will try to show you what I'm doing nowadays related to these two concepts in some projects that we're carrying on right now. Firstly, let's talk about critical. As Professor Mahiri has just said, I have the privilege of editing this special issue on more than 12 critical perspectives and alternative visions of technology in higher education. And in this, I highly recommend it to you because there are some articles from some very interesting authors that are trying to see the development of educational technology from critical visions. In the editorial, Professors Neil Selwyn and myself try to do not only a summarize of what is in each article, we try to make a reflection of what happened. And we said basically 7 things. We need to, about the future of educational technology, we need to talk more about learning itself, not learning as an adjective. We need to talk about pedagogy in the wider perspective. The human aspects, we need to go further in the human aspects of digital technology use in education. We have to avoid the hyper-individualization of digital education. We have to avoid the commercialization of higher education, or at least be aware of it. We have to be aware, and depends on your side, because you're never neutral, never fight on the neoliberalization of the higher education. And definitely we need to try to make a constructive criticism of digital technology in higher education, because this is about higher education. But I have also edited this special issue that is half in Spanish, half in English, as 5 and 5 articles about debates regarding technology in education. If you're going to see QR codes in my whole presentation, if you want to take the URLs of these articles, you can just scan the QR code and they are there. So here we also have some things, because we also reflect about this in the editorial. It's important to understand the educational process with technology, but understanding what is happening. We need to make educational decisions with technology. We need to be careful of digital agency, the nature of educational institutions. I know that it seems that I'm very repetitive, but it's so everywhere. I have seen it so important in everywhere. Enriching the role of our participants, definitely. Redefining educational technology as a field, and continue changing and exploring new ways for research in educational technology. There are other very interesting editorials and very interesting special issues this year with more or less the same concerns. I highly recommend you these 3. This editorial from Professor Ben Williamson, John Potter, and Rebecca Inan, that are really interesting people, about what are the wish list for an editor in educational technology, talking about good topics, new topics. This editorial from Professor Jill Jameson, and this one from Professor Gerbiesta and other teachers and other professors are really interesting. There are more, but I highly recommend you these 3 for thinking a bit more about the future of educational technology. But what is my intention to say that educational technology is devastated? No, it's not. It's not. It's just trying to figure out how we're going to answer to those things. The idea is, as we have said before, as Professor Selwyn and myself have said before, is a critical vision, but a constructive vision. I'm from the Department of Didactics and School Organization, so I'm not a sociologist. Professor Neil Selwyn it is, but I'm not criticizing sociologists. I'm only saying my mission in the world, my mission in research, is not trying to see what is wrong. My mission in research, my mission in education, because I'm from didactics, is to try to propose something. So I'm definitely on this way. So with this, I'm trying to, sorry. Yes, I'm trying to organize okay, sorry. That's it. I need to organize my research around these words. The first thing is about critical things. And when we try to, even if it's holistic and critical visions, above doing this critical perception or these critical editorials or these critical works in the theoretical way, we are trying also to do an ongoing project that is trying to looking for influences that are giving the innovation the layer that it has in the top. Let me tell you. When you see this symbol in this presentation, these are ongoing projects. Okay. So, firstly, we're in this, from this critical point of view, we are untangling the influence. The influence of what? When we think about why our teachers, our professors, our lecturers, our trainers in formal learning, whatever, whether educator, that is, carry on an educational process or a learning process, where the ideas about educational technology innovation came from. When I talked to my two teachers that I work with, and they told me, Linda, this year I'm going to gamify my class. I said, great. Why? Because it's cool. It's really nice. It sounds great. I got 2 new tools that are so easy to use it, and my students would love it because they seem like Game of Thrones, and they are really on it. So we have to do that. And I always said the first thing, I learned a lot from others, and I said in the beginning, great, nice job, but what are you changing? Are you aware that is behaviorism by the moment, basically? Or what is your proposal? Are you proposing something different? Who convinced you to do this? Have you read it in a book? Have you listened in the newspaper? Have you heard a TED talk? Have you went to a conference? Have you what? Who's influencing you? Indeed, there is another thing. I learned from a colleague, or a colleague, and who your colleague learned from, and where the ideas come from the companies, maybe from the academics. I don't think so, but probably. But from the government, who knows? The question as politics. Those kind of studies are pretty advanced. For example, in all the research from Professor Stephen Ball from London, they are they are researching how policies arrive from the government to the schools and what is the process to enact those policies in schools. But we don't know much things about the ideas about innovation in educational technology from our teachers. So we are trying to discover what are the traits of those influencings. Not only for knowing from where they are, but also for knowing what are the channels, the mechanisms to spread the innovation ideas. How social media are doing this. How the learning environment of our teachers are increasing those things. I'm doing this with a professor from Griffith University in Australia. So we are starting with Spanish community, because I think that this is a very particular and contextualized thing. But I really believe that there are some common players everywhere, and maybe we can take a look on them. So this is one of the things that I do. Other things are more related to this concept of holistic. I was a bit confused, I have to confess, confused with the concept of holistic and holistic, because they are both, and they are both arriving to, in case of learning analytics, for example, Simon Buckingham-Shum from University of Sydney is using holistic, but speaking about learning analytics from the person, the entire person. But in this case, I'm not talking about the person only, I'm talking about everything. If I'm going to propose a social material perspective with this relational ontology that I have talked to you some months ago, I have to say that I'm trying to see it from a holistic perspective. So we're running some projects focused on learners, some projects focused on teachers, and some projects focused on practices. In the case of learners, we're basically working on the concept of personal learning environments. The concept of personal learning environments started around 2004, and it came from computer science when the virtual learning environment started to be more social, and we started to use social media a lot, and they started to be very important for us. We started to think on the possibility of that every person would create their own personal learning environment from the computer science point of view. But then the pedagogist people and the educationalist arrives, and then we said, yeah, but this is very small. Because indeed the personal learning environment of someone is not only what they use, what things they use, what tools they use. And this is much more complex, much more complex. Indeed, one thing, I'm not speaking about personalized learning environments. Let me make this small differentiation. When we speak about personalized learning environments, we're speaking about learning environments that are conditioned, improved, or whatever, using the data and helped by machines or engines that help people to reconfigure or profile their learning environment. So basically, it's something that is personalized by the machine. When I speak about personal learning environments, I'm speaking about learning environments that are particularly empowered by people, where the person is in charge of taking the decisions. So that is focused on empower people on using in the best way possible the current tools and also the current opportunities that current technology is giving us to learn more, not only by ourselves but with other people. If we would resume what is a personal learning environments, maybe this definition would help us. From the educational point of view, a personal learning environment is this. I know that you read faster than me, so especially in English. But what is this about? Indeed, it's all the tools that we use for learning and how we learn, basically with the traditional ways, but are very, very, they can cover the majority of the things that we do. Access and decode information, read, listen, watching, recreating knowledge, doing things, and reflecting while we're doing, and discussing with other people, with our personal learning network, discussing and controversy with others. We learn basically with these three activities, what we use, how we do all these things, how they are connected. This is our personal learning environments. The first book, the first volume, entirely related to personal learning environments from the educational point of view, was in 2013 and is in Spanish and is open. Basically, the first chapter is already translated. If you're curious or if you're bilingual, it would be nice. So it's open and free. But it's a techno-pedagogical approach. We're speaking about technology, we're speaking about education, and it's about how people, the personal learning environment enact how people learn in this digital environment. Some authors would say that we are not in a digital environment, but in a post-digital environment, where the digital is just something that is okay, like the air is there. So we have to go ahead in understanding that everything is digital. But I know that the post-digital as term would be controversial as well, so I'm going to continue saying digital. So, personal learning environments, decoding, recreating knowledge, and personal learning network. Tools, activities, attitudes, and mechanisms. Separated. If I'm using the same tools as Cherise, or the same activities for learning, because we are colleagues, we are course mates, and we have the same personal learning environments, it's clear that not. Why? Because our personal learning environment is a socio-material entanglement. It's something that is extremely related to each other. All the things, all the tools, all the mechanisms are so related to each other that it's readily as it's unuseful to separate each other to analyze them. So it's great to analyze it from this relational point of view. When we speak about PLE, we talk about the learning that is situated, that is contextual, that is dynamic, because it's changing all the time with your needs, with your context, and definitely that is charged with a lot of uncertainty. But on the other hand, this is our life, so it is great for helping us to think about how we learn and for helping us to improve internally how we are learning. So if we can analyze how we are learning, we can improve our mechanisms. It's a basic assessment. It's a basic conviction from self-regulation of self-direction in learning, that if you understand how you are learning, you can improve it. But on the other hand, if you are a learning designer and you are aware about the personal learning environments of your students, maybe you can help to improve this personal learning environment. And you can help to organize the conditions for improving this personal learning environments. It's external conditions and modifications. And definitely it will help to metacognition, and definitely it will help to increase and open the epistemological convictions about what learning is. Because one of the things that we know from some of our research is that the students, when you ask to your students or to learners about their mechanisms to learn, they all depends on what your students think that learning is. For example, I remember we did a research in 2010 where we work a lot with our students. We give them a lot of tools. They will use a lot of things. We ask them, what are you going to use in the future? They told me this and this and this and that. And for what? For this and that and that. I was so happy. And then I asked, but what have you learned from this course? And 30% of them told me nothing. And said, oh, what? So next question, why nothing? Do you really do you believe that you haven't learned nothing? And they told me, no, by heart, I don't remember nothing from the course. And I say, okay. So probably if after this you tell them what can you use for continuing learning, they will say nothing. Because their epistemological beliefs about what learning is are constricted to this. So if we can be aware about how we learn and how we use and we can reflect about this, we can change or open this epistemological beliefs as well. So because the learning is dependent of this, and the self-regulation and the metacognition is dependent, epistemologically dependent of this. And also, of course, it's very important in order to think on this personal, social, and learning to learn competence. This is the name that it has in the European Union. Probably here in the States is another name, but it's basically learning to learn competence. This is PLE. What we have done? We have done some research with students. We have tried to see how they learn. We have tried to see how they use the different tools to do different things. We have proved that PLE is not only techie, it's also analogic, it's also based on how we discuss. And also we now are trying to see how the personal learning environment is influencing other fields in education. Indeed, we are doing some literature reviews related to self-regulated learning and personal learning environment, and also we are doing some, these two papers are in review. We are living on writing or on the review, yeah? This is our life. I expected that you too. And rejected as well as another good moment. It's a good moment. Okay, this is about learners, but what about teachers? When we think in teachers from this holistic point of view, we always come back to the educator's professional definition. Because with this digital context, everything is digital. Everything, our citizenship, our society is defined as digital. But the question is that all our institutions, our national and international institutions, are trying to define how the teachers would be in this digital environment. Indeed, in Europe, we got from the European Commission this model of DigCom Edu, Digital Competence Edu for Educators, from 2017. And this is nice. Indeed, this is this and the ISTE 2017. It was a very big change from the previous one. Why? Because the previous one were defined some kind of digital teacher that basically was someone with a big digital competence, and in the top of the digital competence, a bit of teaching. It's like the other day, I think the previous one, in a newspaper, remember that someone says the problem with interdisciplinarity and social sciences is that we are becoming in the top. The social science become the top of the cake, but not the cake. We're in the top of the cake, decorating it. And my impression when I saw the other models, the previous one, I have to say that ISTE and as well as DigCom Edu, they both are farther. But the previous one were the digital competence, and on the top of it, something about the teacher. They don't think in technology further than as an instrument, of course. They always think in technologies as a tool. They think in a teacher as an operator that is inside the classroom and basically is independent or isolated, who knows. Forced by standards, and who rules the standards, not ideology. In Spain, nowadays we're in tough moments with this not ideological moments for teachers, and I have to say publicly that for me education is ideology. It's about ideology. It's not neutral at all. But well, they understand that a teacher is an operator, and we are not. So I understand that the teacher, and I come back to the previous definition of what a teacher is. So we just have to go to the traditional bibliography about what a teacher is, and let's review Linda Darling-Hammond, Paula Misra, Professor Escudero, Zeike, or Cochrane-Smith. There are many authors that have defined what is a teacher. So we need to remember that. But we also need to define what exactly is a competence for us. Is a competence something that is helpful for evaluate you and full point? Period? That's all? Or we are speaking about competence? We are speaking about literacies? What is? And it's important to define it. And nobody is defining it. They are defining the frameworks, but they are not defining why this is from. So Professor Esther, Professor Eden, and myself, we have worked on this holistic model. This holistic model for defining what is a teacher is trying to reflect the 6 traditional roles of a teacher, but in the digital times. It's not about using technology, it's about being aware and teaching in a digital time. So we have to talk about being an expert in digital pedagogical contents, to do contents, to create contents, but also to be able to evaluate contents that are coming from. Where are they coming from, how they are, who is developing, how we use it, how we can use them, what is the format, what is the content, where it's come from. Also, they are creators and managers for emerging pedagogical practices. Indeed, nowadays the emerging pedagogists are not anymore, never have been in that way, but probably today more than ever, they are not, you cannot see in a normal class project-based learning pure. That's only a theoretical thing. In the reality, the teacher tried to do this, but is combining with cooperative work, and also is combining with some behaviorism because of the rush and many things. So these emerging things are emerging also with the kind of technology that is intervening in our class. Not only with our permission, also without our permission. Even without being here. How Twitter is intervening in my class, how Snapchat is intervening in my class. And they are not Snapchatting from my class. Think so. No. Also, it's an augmented reflected practicer. When we speak about this action, I have to translate. Sorry. The teacher as a researcher in an action research proposal. This is a traditional vision of a teacher that we are listening very few times lately, because teachers are less and less researchers. There are more and more operators and less researchers. But nowadays, it's not only about action research today, it's also about action research connected everywhere. The majority of teachers that I know that are innovating in their classrooms is not because of their colleagues in their school. It's probably because they are connected with more people around the world. So they have to be aware about this, about the possibilities of doing it, and about the tools for doing it. Also, they would be expert in enriched learning environments, not only about the personal learning environments of their students and how their courses in primary and secondary at the college also, how their course is contributing to the personal learning environment of the students, but also how their personal learning environment, them as a teachers, they have their own personal learning environments, and how this is the center of their professional development process, teacher professional development. But these two are basically outside every proposal about digital competence in teachers. Firstly, the importance of using ICT to expand the relationships with the community. I don't know here in States, but at least in Spain, this community developer role of the teacher is less and less common. We are trying to revert this perspective, to restart this perspective as the school as center of the community development. And for it, ICTs are crucial, not only to create channels of communication that it is, but also to understand how they are doing the things, how the things are happening in the community. And finally, to every teacher, every single teacher, even if they are not using technology, they must be aware and sensitive to the use of technology for social engagement, from the social engagement perspective. Not only how students can change the world using technology, but also how the world can change students with technology. If you are teaching history with your chalk and your discourse, even in that moment, if you're teaching maths with your chalk and your discourse, even in that moment, if you don't want to use technology, you need to be able to be aware of technology and to know that your students are living in a real world full of technology, with you or without you, with them or without them, preferably with them. So we are working on this, with this model, we are working on it. We are working on it in two different things. Firstly, we are trying to do a validation with teachers in 3 different countries in the world. Basically now we're working in Spain, in Argentina and Australia. Validation of this project, and we want to reorganize this model and this framework to try to be more participatory as a framework. And also in other project, in another European project, we're exploring how universities are close to any model of digital teachers. To who are we hiring for being a teacher at the university? It's nice to be professor at that moment because nobody's going to ask me. No, but we are trying to see how our institutions are taking care of these kind of things in different universities in Denmark, Ireland, Poland, Germany, and Spain. But also we're speaking about agency. When we speak about personal learning environment, when we speak about teacher professional development, it seems that we are always thinking on competencies, on what you can do, what is in your hands. And we are talking about how technology can give you the opportunity of doing. But indeed, for really having this opportunity of doing things, we have to be agents of these things. Agent of your competency as a teacher, agent as a learner. We speak about digital agency. We are very aware about the importance of digital agency nowadays. This is a very, well, it's not very old, but it's primitive in terms of learning analytics. I love this framework of the cycle of learning analytics from Professor Doc Cloud. He was, at that time, he was in Open University. Now I think he's not anymore. But the question is that Doc Cloud always says, learning analytics is about data, metrics, intervention, and learners. But on each one of those elements, we have many questions to do. Data? What data? From which tool are those data coming? Metrics? What metrics? What is the theory behind the metrics that you're taking off? What are the kind of metrics that you're using for collecting those data and for transforming those data? What is the intervention that you are doing? And how those interventions are impacting on learners? The question is that this cycle is always on this way. But learners, in the majority of those perspectives, are not in charge of their changings or their interventions. You see? The arrow is going to learners. It's arriving to learners. Today, there are other perspectives about the learning analytics infrastructure, and I really like all the stuff that Professor Simon Buckingham shown and his work and some other professors are doing around the world on empowering students for the use and the development of educational infrastructure for learning analytics. But the question is that it's not only about students, it's about how people are aware about the data. How they are aware about the data and if they can use it or not. And if they are or not prepared to use them. We are speaking about personal data literacies. For it, this is the base. There's a big project in Australia nowadays that is ruled by Professor Pangrazio and also with Neil Selwyn, and they are working on this digital agency. We are not going to, in the project that we're starting, we're just starting, we are not looking on the personal data literacies of students only, but we try to go into the normal people or everyone in the community more started to explore how to improve the digital agency of them. But apart from the digital agency, there is the agency for the digital world. That is not about only you as a person that have the agency for doing this. It's also to give you and to think on you and the personal learning environments and the competencies for giving you the opportunities, the social opportunities for developing your competence. Because I know a lot of teachers that are really competent in digital terms, or that are really competent as teachers, and they definitely don't have the opportunity of doing this because they don't have the agency the agency factors, they don't have the agency conditions, sorry, for being agent of that. Finally, I want to show you some projects that we are going related to practices. Basically, we work on network learning, understanding that the learning activity is always emergent. We can design the learning, the teaching. We can design the teaching, but our students are always changing our learning design and creating their own learning activities. And for it, we used the activity-centered analysis and design framework from Professor Peter Goodyear and Lucila Carvalho from Australia and New Zealand. And they understand that once we design all of these things, the learning activity emerges as a socio-material activity. So when you, when you try to understand what happens after you give some instruction to your students, those are exams from my students this year. They had to do a video. I don't teach them how to do a video, or I only force some things from the video and some questions, and they do that. They do many different things. So the question is how they arrive to here, and how these things reflect or not my learning design. How we can understand it as a social material thing. What she decided first, the tool, and with the tool she decided what to introduce. She decided to do firstly the content, and then she get this tool. Maybe she tried to do it electronically, but finally she decided to do more by hand because how we can get it. The idea is to try to explore social material approaches to learning activity analysis. Why? Because we understand that if we try to understand more in a social material way what the learning activities are and how they happen, we can improve our learning or teaching design. For it, we are getting a lot of information from, in this case, is higher education. Some of them are my students, and there are activities that they do. And we are trying to analyze the learning design from a relational point of view, trying to understand what are things that are implied in the learning design. We're also trying to understand how, in clusters, trying to organize and to make emerge the relationship between all the actants in the reflections of our students, in the blog post that they develop. And we are trying to explore mixed methods and clustering and social networks analysis for mapping the relationships between the actants in trying to see new perspectives of the activities. It's mixing, at least it's trying to see other perspectives. This is one of our works that is going to be presented next year in the Network Learning Conference, hopefully. So we are going, but we are also working with teachers. We're trying to explore with them how to think on all these things before. How to think in the epistemics, in the social organization of the classroom, how to think on the big things that they have to think about the learning design. So for it, Professor Lucila Carvalho and Pippa Yeoman, Sydney and New Zealand, created this ACAD framework toolkit for teachers, for analyzing and also for design learning. And now, they both and all the two professors in Spain, we are working on the translation and the validation of this toolkit for the Spanish speakers, for Spanish speakers, not only for Spain, for Spanish speakers. So we are working with other countries in Latin America as well. So basically this, my final battle. I'm also running this call for papers because we are really curious about how we are teaching to educators around the world how to about technology. So if you are running something interesting for teaching teachers, future teachers, or current teachers how to use technology in a good way, in a very innovative way, don't hesitate to send us your work. The deadline is 30th of March, so you're full of time for participating in this. This is a international journal, a peer-reviewed journal, and Professor Lee Graves from Arizona State University and myself will be glad to have your work with us. These are our holistic and critical visions. A lot of things, a lot of battles, but a lot of interesting things, and I really believe that is doing steps to go further on this effort. So just reinforce and taking advantage of this moment for re-invite you to participate and be open for your questions and comments and suggestions and contacts and whatever. So thank you very much for being here in this very busy time of the fair. By the way, if you're curious, here there are some of the text that I have written before that include some of the ideas that you have listened in this presentation. Some of them are in Spanish, some of them are in English, but mostly in Spanish. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please.
Quick question. You seem to make a distinction between pedagogy and teaching.
Yep.
How do you understand or make a distinction?
Basically, it's a distinction. It's a tradition distinction. The European continental tradition, that is basically German and mostly German and French, understand pedagogy as the science of education. Science of education that includes not only formal but non-formal learning, not only teaching but also organizing, that includes anthropology, sociology of education, economy of education, and so on. In the Anglo-Saxon tradition, you understand that pedagogy is just about teaching. In the continental European tradition, teaching is the field of didactics. Didactics are about doing class, running a class, but the pedagogy is wider. But it's a problem because we always have, language is not only about words, it's about fields of understanding. Yeah? Any question? Please.
Yeah. Would you be interested in looking at how you maybe imagine institutional structures or higher educational institutions in the digital world? For example, the earning power of going online for higher education. Higher education is an anchor of interdisciplinary learning, or higher education is an anchor for breaking the boundaries between the demands of the labor market and what we learn in higher education. So just focusing not on the learners, not on the teachers or the practices, but
Not on the market.
yeah, but the institutional structures.
I thank you for your
Yeah.
question. I really believe that it depends on what is higher education for us. The question is, higher education is a market training field? Nice, right? If we decide that this is higher education for, we're not solving the things, and maybe we can ask more to the market. The question is why? What is higher education for? Is just a training for market, or is more than this? I love to think, but probably because I'm a romantic lady, but I really believe that education is about professionalization, but it's about socialization and it's about subjectification. This is the three big things about education, and are from Gerd Biesta, not mine. But in relation to higher education, when you think on what is an institution in higher education, you have to take decisions. From my point of view, university, the current organization of university are not the best place for being interdisciplinary, for example. But because of that, because of the cake, you remember the cake? We're in the top of the cake, but we're not mixing each other. We don't have much time for thinking about this. We are too focused on teaching sometimes. And we don't say that if we want that someone innovate in their classes, we need changes from the organizational point of view that are not taken into account. We are not changing the timetable in schools. We want to do innovation with educational technology, with collaborative groups, but with 50-minute hours classes. The university is the same. The question is that it's a bigger thing than we thought. I think that the challenges that we got are much bigger than we thought before. And we need to rethink about them in a big perspective. If we are going to really if we want to be realistic with our students, for our students at the university are not anymore the students of 20 years ago, but we aren't also the teachers from 20 years ago. But we need to think on them more realistically, what they need. And what they need not only for the market tomorrow. From my point of view, the market of tomorrow is a very short vision. We need to create, to empower people. I know that when I say empower, mostly of you think of me in a very ideological perspective of education. Yes, I am. And I'm not sorry about it. Yeah, because I really believe that education is for empowering people and it's for emancipating people. And it's for empowering people to get their own rules and to get their own society and to improve their own society, understand themselves not only as a person but as a person social. Yeah, and it includes that if you want to rule a company is nice because you have to have the opportunity of doing and the rules for doing. But these tools are not about techniques or about tools even. They are about critical thinking and most critical perceptions about what is around you.
You've convinced us that the personal learning environments are extremely complex and include so many things. So how does a teacher who's designing instruction for 30 people in her class, who each have their own individual personal learning environments intersecting with the classrooms, culture, and climate and context and tools, how does a teacher do that?
This is a very interesting point because of traditionally, indeed, we have tried to control the learning environment of our students. You're going to learn from here. Indeed, the majority, we have done our research some years ago where we explore the personal learning environments of students of the final year in undergraduates. And the majority of them, they don't understand that they have a personal learning environment. They understand that, what do you learn from? From where my lecturers say? From where my professors say that I have to learn from? This is my only personal learning environment. But actually, what we are trying to propose is that you don't think on what is the entire personal learning environment of your student. Try to think on your course as a part of this personal learning environment. So in my course, I'm trying to help you to develop your autonomously for being an independent learner. I'm going to give you some tools and some mechanisms and helping you to enrich your personal learning environment. I don't need to know all this. But if I'm aware about how important is my course or would be my course for your future, for for including something new in your personal learning environment, even if you forget my content or something specific that I said, or if you don't learn by heart nothing in my class, as my students do. But if you don't, you are learning a lot of things.
So let me ask a follow-up then.
Please.
And I don't want to talk
No,
anymore.
please.
Then how is this any different from not knowing anything about the personal learning environment? Just designing your course so that it's going to offer opportunities for anyone, wherever they're coming from, to take advantage of the course in respect to the goals that you have for their learning in that course.
Learning environments, personal learning environments is not an idea, I love to think on it, not as a new thing that you have to discover to change on. Indeed, this would be a nice understanding for shift your perspective about what is the relationship of your course with your students. The traditional perspective about courses are you are here for learning the things about this topic in this place. Now is my course is a part of what you are going to learn of your mechanisms. It's no different. The question is that personal learning environments is an approach that help you or help teachers to think about it. It's a framework to think about this kind of things. Anybody else? Please.
Thank you for your talk. It was very, very illuminating. And I'm trying to think in terms of a concrete example. It might be a little bit too crass. But given your experience, I'm wondering if there's an educational technology tool that you have come across that is best aligned with or fits with how you're thinking about PLEs.
Indeed, I have to confess that every time that I do and step in deep these kind of concepts, I'm doing a step outside of the tools. But I have to say that, for example, when we're exploring how to analyze the learning activities for this, the making social network analysis with tools of texting tools as blogs, for example, are really interesting because I know that it's very primitive. I'm using blogs. So, but from this primitive perspective, they are reflecting a lot. Even if they are working with text or video, they are reflecting. Those tools that allows students to impress their reflections, probably we have problems because we don't understand very well some of their languages and some of their codes. The pictures of my students are completely different from mine. The pictures, the way they create their videos, the language of YouTubers are completely different from our language in videos. And understanding what are all the codes that they are including in a video would be difficult. But I think we have other technologies that can help us to extract more information from it. So from my point of view, the best possibilities is what you have close to you. Aggregators are good for trying to make them possible, open tools for sharing things. I don't know. This is made in an office suite, online collaborating Google Docs that are open to collaborating between them, and they are shifting. They are changing the tool because of their needs. So I don't have but I know that there are many people using, for example, Symbaloo or other aggregators for working with students about the idea of personal learning environments. There are some master theses from 4 years ago or so about the use of Symbaloo for personal learning environments. Yep.
Yes, I'm really taken with the competency you discussed about expanding relationships with families and communities and being a marker of a competence in the digital world. And I'm curious if you could speak more to that. In particular, what relationships with community institutions might look like, informal learning environments.
Yeah, in the classical definition of what a teacher is, always the importance of teachers as community developers and community facilitators is quite important. From the 70s and 80s, the teacher profession is more and more constricted to the classroom. And try to be more concentrated in your classroom and operate these standards. Yeah? In Spain, we have a huge list of standards, and our teachers are really happy about that. Now, but the question is that when teachers don't understand how the families are nowadays, we have some problems. For example, have you any problems with mobile phones in classes? Yes? We have some. In France, they are forbidden. But in Spain, some parties say they are going to forbid it. But how the families are nowadays, how they talk each other. Are they using mobiles for what? What is the education of people in families? How is the relationship of families with technology? Why our teachers are trying to use, I don't know, what it was the last one? One teacher asked me for using, I don't remember what exactly, tool in a classroom. And I said, but are you aware that in your class there are some students without computers at home? But they have mobile phones. Yeah, but their mobile phone don't resist this kind of application. Are you aware of this relationship? This is community, this is your families. And it's a small thing. But what about the library? What about the other informal resources that are informal, but are very related with what happened in my classroom? And how we as teachers are aware of those, how we can manage those, how we can use technology and be aware of technology on this relationship with them. Is more or less what you want that I answer this? Is that it? You want more?
I'm curious about the opportunities provided by those kind of, that technology exists outside of the classroom, and
for example,
in
the
museums or libraries, that there are these resources out there.
how we are including the library resources in our class. Are we in primary school or in secondary school using the electronic resources of our library, local library in our classroom? Do we aware about how many students are by their own each afternoon and they don't have any opportunity of going through whatever, and maybe we can use technology for helping them to do something, or maybe we are ignoring the possibilities of mobile phones and they got or they don't. Those kind of things are not only inside the classroom, it's also outside the classroom. How we can include the parents as well to be part of our class. This communication with parents that is always clue to do many things in classrooms, and that is so poor, and we can improve it because our parents have mobile phones. Not probably for doing a 3D video, 360 video for doing, no, but probably for getting some pictures, creating something, doing some stuff, being aware of what is happening outside the classroom. And using technology for this is much more easy than going home to home saying, what's happening here? How are you? And I think that we have to explore it. And this is a crucial part of being a teacher, of being a good one, at least. Anyways, please.
Yeah, I do have a question. Thank you so much for your talk. I took so many notes. Soy colombiano también.
Oh, bien.
So
¿Ves?
I'm even more excited. One of the concepts that I really got me thinking was the concept of personal data literacies. And I'm wondering if you've seen the ways in which those type of literacies might be connected to teachers' decisions to adopt certain types of technologies.
Yeah, indeed. One of the, I think that is the biggest challenge that learning analytics has in general. How we can, because of the I'm very skeptical about the possibilities of adaptive learning. The reality is that adaptive learning is giving us some answers, but about some things. I probably know the key things. But the crucial things are giving teachers enough information for changing or for improving their learning design, and also giving students or learners enough information for taking decisions, taking informed decisions. When Pangracios speak about data literacies, they focus on the people, how to empower people to use their own data to take decisions about their own learning. What kind of data you have to collect, and how you can take meaning from those data. And this is very important for learners, but it's also very important for teachers. The majority of our teachers also at the university, they go to the dashboard of whatever learning environment that you're using, Sakai, WebZD, or whatever that you're using, Moodle, and they set the dashboard and say, oh, nice class. That's all. Your students have been here for 3 hours every day. This is not useful for you. Maybe they open the window and they go for party and they come back and they close the window. That's all. What are the good questions? What are your questions about your students? So now in many projects around the world, indeed, and there are some in Europe, in the north of Europe, especially in Ireland, and also in Finland, if I'm not wrong, they presented them at media, lesson media. They are asking for teachers about, okay, we are going, and also the project that I show you from Simon Buckinghamshire, they're asking for teachers, okay, and to learners. Okay, what do you want to know? How your course is built? How can we help you to have more data, good data that can help in you? Also, this includes in teachers data literacy for using those data. But this is also something that is being included in the digital competence for teachers. Many authors are including the data literacy for the teaching competence, digital teaching competence. But I think it's the same of the digital thing. We need to be competent in general. We need to be competent for being aware and for being able to use data and the digital in the best way possible. Better? It's good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for everything.
Thank you for speaking with us.